everyone. I'm Jessica Lindl and the author of The Career Game Loop. Today, we're diving into one of the hardest topics that all of us struggle with, no matter who you are, which is how do you actually get to that holy grail of the job offer? I'm joined today by Sam Distaso, who's a colleague of mine here at Unity. He's just an incredibly inspiring example of how you hack the grind. How do you do that hard work of turning all of your leveling up and your inspiration and your focus into an actual job offer? What we'll hear today is Sam actually started off in corporate accounting. He moved into startups after that and then broke into the VR industry, ultimately landing here at Unity. But we're going to learn a lot about all of the challenges and headwinds that he faced, which frankly are not unusual. And he's going to give us a lot of practical advice for anyone navigating that career change. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Jessica. So exciting.
All right, well, let's dive in. So as I mentioned, your career path transitioned from accounting into the world of VR and gaming. When was the moment you realized that you needed to make a shift?
I had some very unfortunate timing of that moment. I had just read the Steve Jobs autobiography by Walter Isaacson, and I was just about to start my job in corporate accounting, and I was a month or two away from starting. And that was when I was like, ooh, I think I actually might want to move into technology space, which is not the path that I'm in right now. After reading that book, I kind of landed on, over the subsequent months, what my kind of life's work North Star was going to be. And that was going to be this idea of scaling exciting technologies into mainstream adoption. So when I landed on that, I was like, ooh, but I'm just about to start this other job. So that created a little bit of a moonlighting situation of what I do during the day and then what I'm pursuing at night, which we can kind of get into. But it is worth noting that you can't always time these things of when you land on what you want to do, and it's never too late, and you're never too far away from that ultimate goal to start making moves to get there.
And you, I mean, this was no run-of-the-mill corporate accounting job. You went to a great university and you got one of the most prestigious offers you could. You were following that path that we all grew up with.
Yes. So I started off at Deloitte, and it was, I actually had to, even before getting into the gaming space, I kind of used this same path of kind of hacking this grind, so to speak, to get Deloitte to come to my university, which was UC San Diego, and to specifically then bring me on board, even though I didn't have the exact background as everybody else.
So before we get into that methodology, you sent out 74 applications before you got your first startup. So 7 startup jobs, so 73 rejections before you got your first job. How did you handle those rejections?
So there's a couple of ways. So let's just call a spade a spade. The first ones are hard. The first ones are really hard because they require the most emotional and physical work. So, for the first ones, you got to really get the resume updated. You have to get cover letters done. You have to research the companies and the areas and who's hiring and which websites to even go to, submit applications or find jobs. And so there's just a lot of work before you even send out the first initial ones. And then when you get an immediate rejection, that can be deflating, although it's not actually as deflating as getting no response, which is sadly not even much more common. But once you get through the first few, the way that I look at it is, well, for two things. One, there's definitely some, call it like efforts of scale or economies of scale there, so that your resume is then ready, cover letters are ready, you know where to go to, you know how to get these things uploaded, and you can do them a lot faster. But also, and this is more important, I don't have a single hero of mine that doesn't have at least a story of having to really overcome some significant rejection in order to achieve their great goal. It's fun to be on that hero's journey, but only when you know that you're on that journey. And so if you know you're the hero in your own story and you're on that journey, being able to tell these stories, like in this conversation now, or in the thousands of other times I've been able to hark back on that experience of all those rejections, it's now one of my most proud moments of my life that I've gone through. So it's just worth remembering you're not alone, and the more rejection you can go through in that way, it'll actually make you stand out that much more. Your heroes have all done it, And jumping the gun a little bit, but like this whole process of being successful in getting a job, in going through the interview process, and then being successful in the job, by going through that degree of rejection up front, boy, it makes you really strong when you're actually in the job itself.
Mm.
And so I've thought back on that degree of rejections many times when industries go up and down, companies go up and down, and I just find that I'm much less emotionally bothered by it because of that. The amount of rejections I went through when I was kind of pursuing my dream.
Oh, I love that frame that you have to have that moment. You've got the groundwork set, you've done all the investment up front. You start getting those rejections, that negative feedback. You're actually starting your hero's journey. You're what one more rejection closer to the climax of your hero's journey.
That's it. That's it. And without the rejection, you're not on the journey yet.
Exactly. You don't
Arguably.
even get to be a hero.
That's it. That's it. I laugh, but like I look back and I'm like, man, if only I would have known that I was on that journey at the time, for sure. But and I had some sense because, like I said, I knew what my North Star was. But it's really, I wish everybody would keep that in mind, because after the first few, then it almost becomes a point of like pride in a
Right.
weird way. Like,
Right.
I've got these rejections. That's going to make for a great story. Nobody else is going to have to go through this, and that makes me stronger in the long run.
Awesome. So, you went through a process of getting all these rejections and you realized that you needed to change your strategy. Walk us through how you shifted your approach.
Yes. So the way that I shifted it, I kind of thought about it. And I think this probably applies broadly for sure in gaming, but even outside of gaming, was I really thought about what is the game that is afoot. And so most people will think, hey, if you're applying to a role, you submit an application and then you cross fingers, hope to hear back. And hopefully when you hear back, it's good news. And after that, it can keep on being more and more good news. But that's really a kind of hope and pray and send it down to the abyss. Instead, I broke the process down into 3 chunks. And I said, okay, within this game of being really successful on this journey that we're on and where you want to ultimately get to and then have great success there's really 3 games within this larger game. And each one of those games has very different rules, and don't get upset that it has different rules, but it has very different rules and you need very different skills or talent trees almost to be successful in each one of those games. And so the first game is, how do you actually get a response to be requested to interview? Then the second game is, how do you actually win the interview process and receive an offer? And the last part is, how are you actually going to be really successful in that role? And so when I recognized that was the real game that was afoot, and I should treat each very distinctly as their own kind of games within a game, then I was able to rethink the rules and the criteria of this game that was at play. So, when I have all these 70 plus rejections, gosh, I'm having some PTSD just thinking back to it. But
You're a hero though now. You're a hero.
Yeah, I do it. I look at it and I thought, well, really, who am I trying to win over? Am I trying to win over a hiring manager or a CEO or a customer? No. I'm trying to actually win over the person that works in human resources who's evaluating who to bring in for an interview. And what are the goals and the metrics that individual is based off of? And how do I align myself with those goals? And what I recognized is, if somebody's in that role and they're reviewing all of these applications, that person is really there to service the rest of the employees, the rest of the human resources at that company. And so I thought, you know what? Let me make that individual, that human resources person's job so easy. What if, just theoretically, by the time that she saw my application, she had 10 or 15 different employees at the company that she works at reach out on my behalf saying, you need to look at this guy. You need to bring this guy in because we think he's got something special and we like him. So rethinking the game in that terms, then it changed where I was placing my energy and my effort. Then the game became, how many people at that company can I meet with? Can I win over? Can I understand the culture of the company and make sure that it is actually going to be a great alignment and a great fit? and then ask them at the end, hey, would you mind putting in a good word for me to this individual or for this role? I drafted up something if it's helpful, but only if you'd feel comfortable with it. And so I think rethinking on that frame, then you can take a similar kind of rethink of what the actual game is for the other two processes. But that first part was critical because ultimately, like somebody that's reviewing these applications, they just want to do the thing that's the best for the company. They
Mm-hmm.
really do care about the other employees. They care about the company being successful. And if you can bring somebody that's external internally into the company, that is going to be an immediate fit. It's going to be a great culture fit. They're coming in and already know a ton of the people, and those people have already gone to bat for them. You know that it's going to be a slam dunk to at least let them come in and start the interview process.
Wow. So those informational interviews that you're talking about that even just set the groundwork before you've submitted your resume, right? If I'm understanding you correctly.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So how do you set up and prepare for those interviews?
It's so important, and so few people actually focus on it. It's probably like the most important part of the process, which is, and we all know, we'll hear these things of if you reach out cold to somebody, or maybe you can reach out through your network and you happen to have a contact, a mutual connection. Sure, all of that is good or worth keeping in mind, but what you really want to remember is people were inherently built and wired where if we can share our own experiences and we feel like it's not just landing on deaf ears, but it's landing on somebody that they actually will improve their lives by hearing just your own experiences and not asking you for favors immediately and doing all that, and that they come in and show a genuine interest in your past experiences and how that might help their lives. Luckily, as humans, we are built to be empathetic creatures like that. And we are dying for people to ask us detailed, thoughtful questions about our background to help them in their lives.
Hmm.
And that fundamental truth, all it means is do the research about that person's background, whether it's on a LinkedIn or they have a blog or they've given interviews everywhere else or they're whoever else they're connected to, their general interests, and then think from your core, from a place of authenticity. Where are you trying to head to, and what is that shared overlap? And what is some input or advice this person could share that might help you 1% down that path? Because if it's coming from that degree of authenticity and really thinking proactive about it, that you really care about what they have to say, they're going to then, at the end of that informational interview, when you have a request, in my case, it was, would you mind putting a good word with this individual? They're going to be so happy to, because there's that quote, everybody wants to be part of a winner. They all want to be part of like a winning story. Now they're like emotionally attached. And I have so many mentees from past companies or from grad school and undergrad or people I coached in different ways. I badly want to see them successful. If they're reaching out to me in a specific, authentic, like genuine way, I'm going to do, if there's any way that I can help in that, I think we're all kind of like that. We'll be willing to take one or two steps to help them. So I think that's the part. Come at it from authenticity, preparation, and finding that shared overlap, and genuinely ask them the human questions, not the kind of more robotic ones that might just kind of sound a little bit inauthentic.
And also, I heard from you a similar strategy as to what you did with the recruiter, which is, okay, let me figure out how I make this person's job easier. If they're going through a bunch of resumes, slogging through, what they're really looking for is somebody that's going to transform the company. And if you've already done that work where you have an overwhelming amount of input from these informational interviews, it's going to increase their confidence that they're going to make the right decision. Similarly, when you're walking into these informational interviews, actually try and figure out, what does that person need? What are they looking for? How do we actually start building a relationship with them and make their lives easier too?
That's exactly it. It's there's that term of aligning incentives, and there's the very like physical incentives of like, hey, you have this job and you have to meet these kind of goals and criteria, and how can I somehow help with that piece, or me moving forward does. And then there's like the emotional incentives and alignment piece, and it's I feel good about putting this person forward. Or I know, and look, we're all social beings. We live in different social hierarchies in all different ways. If somebody feels like it's going to help them in that social hierarchy because they're making other people happy and they're bringing in somebody that they know is not going to be making them look awful afterwards, you've done so much of their job for them. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, you know? And even I think sometimes people get this mindset of like, is like manipulative or it's no, it's we all have goals. We all want to be successful, and we all want the companies that we're at to be really successful. And if you can do as much of that legwork for them as possible, that's just a great thing. That's all.
So, how do you? I feel like we've got a little taste of that first game that you described. That second game where you've kind of made it into the interview process, and you're meeting with the hiring manager, and this hiring panel is usually how it works. So, 4 or 5 other people. There's oftentimes a work product that has to be created either from your portfolio, brought in. How do you prepare for that stage?
You know, similar to the first phase, the only commonality between like these three phases is the preparation piece.
Mm.
So for me, the way that I go about it is, and I guess it varies a little bit depending on the style of interview. And sometimes it'll be more behavioral focused. Other times it might be more task oriented or project oriented. But ultimately, we're all still people. And I like to try and think of ahead of time, what are the questions I anticipate being asked? What are the questions that are kind of like those questions that I'm like, oh, I hope they don't ask it because I'm either not as confident in that area or I don't have as much experience in this portion or I don't really have a good example, even if I kind of know. Think about those questions that you'd be terrified if they asked. Put those down and then come up with your answers ahead of time. What I do is I'll write out all the questions I think I could be asked if we're kind of talking about more of a behavioral interview. And then I'll write out all of my questions and then I will record myself hearing the question and then giving my response. And then I'll just listen back. I'll take long walks. I'll listen back to hear how did I come off? Because as we know, like so much of communication is this even nonverbal. So, the words themselves are important and people are going to be keeping notes of that. More importantly, how do you come off when you're saying that? Do you sound rushed? Do you sound a little bit like you're over your skis? Do you sound like you were the real SME, that subject matter expert?
Mm.
That piece is super important, and you can be your harshest critic that way. I think the thing that I even advise my team now, even more broadly, and any mentees is how can you prepare yourself to the point that it's not possible for you to have a negative surprise? And you let your paranoia in that interview process be your best friend to drive the preparation.
You inspired us so much when I had this conversation with you, that we actually created a special supplemental material for the book, that's included in the book,
Awesome.
which is this picking up on your hero's journey. It's actually a hero's journey for a job. So as you're going through both the informational interviews where you're gathering all this data, and then you're going through the interviews themselves and doing all that upfront research, how do you actually write a hero's journey for you walking into this job with all of these challenges and all of the hopes and dreams that everyone has for the right person fulfilling that role coming to life? And so that preparation, that research, that empathy that you're leading with is actually all part of the tool that we have in the toolkit. So thanks, Sam,
I love that. Oh, that
for
is awesome.
inspiring us.
I love that. I love hearing that. And it's kind of like, once you have that North Star, you're kind of immune from the rest of the world and other people and stuff. You're like, hey, I'm on my journey one way or the other. Okay. And it's either, I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know all the path I'll have to get there, but I know I'm going to get there. And so it is so great to hear. I love that. And, it's only after we started talking a little bit. There's like, there's so much of this that obviously applies in the gaming industry, but it is like this game within the game, and gamers are great because they think through how to beat levels and bosses and all the different ways that you can grow in different kind of ways. And this whole like process of getting the job and then being successful in it is so gamified actually if you take that mindset towards it. And being on the hero's journey is like a perfect encapsulation of that.
Yeah, I mean, think of how many thousands of hours we spend and are spent watching Twitch streams, people on, YouTube, just us like doing the hard research of how to get to that next level in whatever game we're playing, the communities that we've built around it. Yeah, it's
That's awesome.
the hard prep. I mean, the thousands of hours, if you just dedicate that same mindset to your career, it kind of feels like a drop in the bucket compared to how
Yeah.
hard you work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The payout's a lot nicer too, by
Yeah,
the way,
yeah.
for success.
Exactly. Exactly. You actually get paid to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, I like this kind of like reward response kind of interaction here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I love that. I love
So
that.
just taking a step back earlier in our career game loop, as we've already covered, there is this whole how do you level up? And so, corporate accounting is no joke. I mean, that is a highly technical field that you prepared for. And then before the first day that you walk into that job, you decide that you want to go into a totally different direction. So how did you actually build the skills and actually represent the skills that you wanted to move into VR?
I am so glad you brought that up because I think there's a gigantic amount of the population that fits in that same area where you're in a job, an industry, a function, a role, and then you have this sneaky feeling like, ooh, I think I actually need to pivot, and it might be multiple pivots. You might need to pivot out of the industry. You might need to pivot in a completely different role or function. How do you get the experience? There's always the chicken and the egg thing of like, oh, people want to hire people with experience, but how do you get experience unless you're at a place that'll give you the experience? So, in short, you want to be a little bit creative with it. What I did was when I was about to start at Deloitte, and then once I got into Deloitte, I'm working really long hours. To your point, it is an intense industry. I have so much respect for people in that industry. It is really, really hard. But what's great about it was it does leave you wanting some kind of outlet on evenings and weekends. And what I thought was, you know what? The best way that I can help myself down this own hero's journey, now that I kind of know where I want to be and it's nowhere near I'm at right now, is I have to prove it to myself first. And if I prove it to myself genuinely, then other people are also going to believe it genuinely. And so what I started was I thought, you know what would help is I have no experience in game development. I have no experience in app development. I have no experience in technology necessarily, apart from general use of these things. So I thought, you know what? What can I do to show initiative, to show that I'm really passionate about this space, and to show that I'm just different from other people that might also say they have a passion or want to get into the VR industry, for instance. And so the first thing I did was I thought, you know what? I want to challenge myself to from concept to launch an app. And this would have been a number of years ago. So the idea was, can I come up with a concept, launch it onto the iOS store, and then that would give me one experience to then be able to talk through, hey, look, I know it shows corporate accounting, and now I'm talking about trying to get into VR and doing more business development, but like I've actually built something from scratch. I've learned the knowledge. I've worked with the right partners. I know the trials and tribulations along the way. I know all the little nuances that designers have to go through, that engineers have to go through, that studio heads have to go through. I know the challenges around what the cost of it and how you actually have to have the right kind of business model around that. And so while I was at Deloitte, I was then building and working on this app in my free time. And as you would expect, it ended up being the fact that I built this app, and the app was basically a way of rewarding people for learning about becoming experts in non-academic areas, in areas that they're interested in. And what it turns out is that the company, the startup that I ended up leaving Deloitte for, that gave me my first shot in this kind of smaller technology space, is because the hiring manager, he also shared a passion for that and had built his own like ongoing blogs where he was trying to do something that was philosophically aligned. And he told me, he said, Sam, if you didn't have that, I wouldn't have hired you. I know that I know that you work hard. You have all the pedigree. I have no doubt you're smart enough from the Deloitte days. but it was actually the app that showed me that you had entrepreneurial spirit. You could be a self-starter. You'll go out and learn this, and you have a real passion for the space. And so now I feel confident bringing you on because you can marry the really hard corporate accounting piece with now this kind of entrepreneurial mindset that you need to have in order to survive at a 10-person startup. Then to get into the VR industry, to your point, that was the next step. That was a very similar type of a move. It was, how can I actually show I'm not just working at this 10-person home services startup. I really care about gaming. Then I without going into all the details, I started dabble into different gaming applications, and I was able to show some gaming credibility with World of Warcraft and some of these other background stories of just showing like, hey, I'm actually one of you. I live and breathe this. And look, when I made this move over to the last time somebody took a bet on me, it paid out really well for them. It's going to be the same here. And so once you have that one win pointing to it, even if it's in a different industry, people want to be associated with passionate winners. And even if you're not a winner, I definitely am not. But even if you're not a winner, if they feel like you've had some real wins that they can associate with, and you're really passionate and you've done big pivots before, it's not as hard of a bet to believe that that person, even if you didn't spend the last 10 years in VR, which nobody had at the time, that you were still a quote unquote safe bet.
Okay. So just really make something. And that was your learning journey. Just, if you can prove that you can get your hands on it, you can create it, you're going to learn all the skills along the way. But more importantly, you're going to learn the entrepreneurial skills and that constant kind of fail forward mindset that you've got to have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And Jessica, in the gaming industry it is the ultimate blend of entrepreneurship, creativity, technical prowess, truly needing to be brave and courageous. It's art. It's all of these things. How can you show that you have those same core personality traits as people that are in this space? And I think it's hard to do it unless you actually just go out there, and you can do it on the side on your own and have something tangible to point to.
And I would add to your list the durable and the soft skills that are required. Like there's no real lone wolves in this industry. We have indies who are building beautiful things, but they're doing it usually with a few other people on the side. And so I think just having that ability to take feedback, to work as a team, to think creatively together, in addition to that long list, is something that you really demonstrated in the process of building
It's
something.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we hear about it all the time when we're talking with different developers, and like in this community, especially this gaming industry, it almost seems weird calling it the industry because we know it's really a community, and it's people want to work with people that are kind spirited, that are passionate about what they're doing, that aren't just shooting down ideas, because that's what the success is ultimately built on in this industry. And so having those soft skills you mentioned, I would argue it's a lot more important in this industry than even many others.
Right, right. So, bringing us full circle as we start wrapping up the conversation, back to rejection. I think Unity made the mistake of rejecting you once before you came back again and came into another job offer with us that thankfully you took. So, any last tips on how to handle that rejection?
So the good news is Unity really helped strengthen me because they rejected me twice. And I thank Unity for that. But it's a really good point, and it does kind of come full circle, and there's a really good message to be had with it, I believe. And it is, if Unity would have rejected me 5 times, I'd still be trying to get in. And the reason is because Unity is the true embodiment of what I care about in my life's work, which is this scaling exciting technologies into mainstream adoption. And I don't believe there's a company out there that is in more different, interesting, awesome ways for the technologies I care about that are exciting, that are really pioneering that than Unity. So whether it was once, twice, 5 times, I'd still be going on it because that's my hero's journey. We never know where it's going to end up. But I think the reason the rejections weren't weren't too brutal is because I knew it was a matter of time. It was a matter of when, not if,
Mm.
because my North Star is so clear of like that, my where my life's work is going to be, and Unity is that called destination, which creates new opportunities and the rest of it. I looked at those rejections. I was like, but you know what? Now I know that much more for this next path. And when I do land in that Unity, they're going to say that was we're sure glad we brought that guy in. And, I've had great success at Unity. And because I know the ethos of it, I can speak really passionately to other people that are here, the trials and tribulations of people at other smaller like game studios. And because of the rejections and because of all the prep and going through these interview processes, it makes you really think, do the core foundations of this company, do I really understand it? And do I really understand my value to where I'm trying to get to? And now where I landed, I'm sure everybody says this, but like I have the best boss who I have such a close relationship with. We're always seeing eye to eye because we've thought super deeply about where we're trying to get to. I have a ton of autonomy, and I'm constantly trying to find more people that are on this same hero's journey. How can we bring them in, and then how can we free them to go out and pursue that same kind of passion?
You're bringing up, I think, another key learning for us in this experience, which is how we identify our mission. And once we've identified that mission, that North Star, there's this gravitational pull towards it, that you just have every single day when you get out of bed, feeling and facing those rejections along the way with that gravitational pull is just more learning. It's just more data, more insights that you have.
Exactly it. And I actually, the first thing, and I would challenge any listeners, any viewers to do one thing. And it's if you want to, if you're not sure if you're on your hero's journey, or if you want to find what is that mission, like if you can, the task is in one sentence, come up with a mission statement of sorts for you, an impact statement, which just answers what impact will you have under the idea of your life's work? What impact will you have? And the goal is make it as specific as possible with the one rule that it's never allowed to change for the rest of your life. And if you could write down that one statement and it fits that criteria, as specific as possible, never going to change for the rest of your life, you've landed on it. Now you have like a superpower. You're immune from all the rejection. You're immune from the biggest issue that causes most people to struggle, which is time, or feeling like they have to work in weeks and months. Whereas if you have that mission, you get to work in decades. It's such a superpower.
Thank you, Sam. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, it was such an honor to be able to work with you on this whole project. And there's a lot of people out there that are struggling in different ways. They want to be in this industry, or they're in it, but maybe they want to change roles in it. And I wish that all the work that you're doing on this project, I mean, I really wish you had it like 10 years ago, would have really helped me out a lot, or 20 years ago, but so important. So important. And so there's a lot of people that I know would actually benefit from this. I wish there's more information on it today, but I love the message that you're getting out.
Thanks so much, Sam. I really appreciate it. And the honor is all mine. You, in summary, really took us through every stage of the career game loop. You went on that quest, unfortunately, the day before you were starting in corporate accounting to figure out what it is that you wanted to do, really guided by this North Star, as you say, of bringing innovative technologies into the mainstream. You figured that out early on. In order to level up, you went ahead and just started making something on the side in the very few free hours you have when you're working corporate accounting at Deloitte. And then you taught us all how to hack the grind. I mean, it's not throw resumes into the world and just hope and pray that somebody picks them up, which is 1-200. Instead, break this down into 3 different games that you're playing. How do you get that recruiter to pay attention to you? How do you build up those informational interviews? Which, by the way, informational interviews are 1 in 12. Ultimately, it lands you in a job versus 1 in 200. Then you're moving into that second stage of the informational interviews. How do you do that research? Or sorry, the real interviews. How do you actually do that research to figure out in our own kind of job hero's journey how you're going to be the hero in that next job? And then once you're in the job, you wrapped us up, which is, how are you job crafting and moving into new opportunities, whether you're pivoting within the job itself into a new team, pivoting into a new company, or into a totally different industry and starting it all over. So thanks so much for not just focusing deep on hacking the grind and getting that job, but the entire core career game loop.
It's so much fun. I hope it helps some people out there. And who knew that the answer to everybody's issues was gaming and the way that gaming principles work? Like, who knew?
All right. Thanks so much, Sam. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks,
Thank
Jessica.
you.